Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Interact podcast. My name is Josh Haynam. I'm the co founder and CEO at Interact. And today I am joined by Allisa Jacobs, who's the founder at Allisa Jacobs Home and Interior Design. She has a really cool quiz, and I'm excited to chat with you about it. So thanks for being here, first of all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. Tell us about your quiz and why you decided to make it.
Yeah, great question. So I started building this quiz about 2 years ago, and really my thinking behind it was I wanted to create an opt-in that felt more engaging. So I had just built this home design site. Um, Everything I do is kind of like learning as I go, and I just built this site, and it felt like I just put something out there, but I wanted to find a way to engage with people more than just like offering a PDF or some sort of like free idea. And so when I came across the idea of a quiz, it immediately felt like it aligned with what I was trying to do, but then it seemed perfect for the home decor space because there's so many avenues and styles and things people are trying to figure out, like what area they fit into or what style feels best for them. It also reminded me of like my teen years of doing those magazine quizzes. So there's a little
Mm-hmm.
nostalgia there. So then when I found Interact, it just was I was super excited. I remember finding it and just immediately jumping in, and it's like let's do this, let's build this.
That's cool. That's cool. If you'd like to feel old with me for a second, um, so I think I'm in the same boat as you, where my memory is like they were printed in magazines and you'd fill it out, right? And then when we got to the internet, we're like, cool, let's do that again. You know what people are doing now? They're instead of remembering magazines, they remember BuzzFeed, like it's nostalgic. And
Oh,
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm way too old. This is not right. So
no, you got to go back to the magazine days.
I know, right? The old printed version. The question that I was specifically curious about for your quiz was how did you bundle up the styles at the end? Because like I'd imagine there's like a whole range of different interior design styles that someone could have. Like how did you whittle that down into just like a set number of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it was a little bit of science. I want to say I did research, and then just informal anecdotes, and then also just intuitively, I think what I felt like my audience was maybe interested in. Leading up to my site, I had spent some years on Instagram. I kind of had just threw things out there, and that grew organically. And during that process, I fielded a lot of questions of people asking me, what's your home decor style? And it made me really reflect and think because things changed over time and over years as I got to think more about myself and what felt like authentic and right, like who am I? What does feel like myself at home? And so listening to the audience on that platform kind of made me think more about different styles. And then people would ask and say things like, "Oh, is your house a little bit mid-century?" And so I could tell there was like an interest in that style. Or people were asking, "Your bedroom seems like it's boho," and so there were words that people were using. And so I think I spent some time going back through conversations and kind of tracking what had seemed like points of interest. And then there were blog posts that I had already written. And so I was trying to be forward thinking in how I would connect the results back to my site. And so I had specific posts, I think about like organic modern style. That's, I think, what my style just naturally is. And so I already had an existing post on that. So it made sense for one of the results, um, likely because people found me because they like organic modern style. And then their results, if that was the style that they leaned into, I could, connect back to existing blog posts. But it also created opportunities to create new content because when I thought about, people asking about mid-century and different options, it gave me an opportunity to write future content that I could then tie back into the quiz. So it kind of seemed like one of those intuitive or like that cycle, that wheel where the question prompts the answer and the answer prompts the question. So that was helpful. And there was a moment though, I will say, where it did feel very vast, and Interact does have all the options of like, you can have so many possibilities, where I did kind of jump in and like, oh, I could go on forever with this. So I did have to rein myself in and be like, okay, what's realistic? And then I know there's also like the paradox of choice, right? Like if people have too many options, then it was going to feel overwhelming. So I think, if I recall, I think I did have another option, and I had to cut that one and kind of combine it under an umbrella of a different style, because I felt like it would just be too overwhelming.
Yeah, I like all of that. It kind of just connects up a lot of the stuff that you already had between the conversations that people were asking you questions in on Instagram, the suggestions and the words that people were using, and then the content that you already had. And then it also kind of parlayed into future content that you ended up creating from the quiz, which is really cool. It just kind of ties everything together, and that's really nice. A specific pain point that a lot of our customers have is that part of like knowing when to just call it good enough. What was that like for you in terms of like being like, all right, sure, I could make this like 50 different styles, but that's going to be too much. Like, how did you like mentally walk yourself through that?
That's a great question. I do remember testing out the quiz, and I even had my teenage boys test it out.
Nice.
And I think a few friends. And so I took some feedback. I also, in another lifetime, I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher. And I think there was like that assessment piece in my brain of just being really mindful of, like I said, offering too many options, and realizing that I wasn't probably going to get helpful results. And I wouldn't be able, I think one of the biggest things I thought about is I wouldn't be able to sustain, if there were like 20 results, for example. Like, I wouldn't, like, how am I going to write sequences for all of that? How am I going to keep track of tags and like all the things that come down the line? If it was just going to end at just the results, you know what I mean? Like, sure, I think 20 results could be fine. But knowing that I wanted to, I have the integration with ConvertKit or Kit, and knowing that I wanted to provide sequences and targeted campaigns and have tags, I think there was just a moment of reality where I was like, this just would not be sustainable if I had too many result options. So
Yeah, that's those are two, I think, really helpful data points, like the background, the teaching experience of knowing, like seeing it firsthand. I would imagine with, your high schoolers, right? It's like they're not going to give you any leeway if it's like too much stuff. And so that background, and then also just realizing the limitations of like, well, sure, I could set up this crazy branching massive thing, but then I'd have to maintain that, which I think people tend to not think about when they're like, oh, I need to make it perfect. So that's really helpful stuff. Jumping ahead a little bit, how has this been in terms of the engagement from your audience on your website, or if you have it featured on other channels? Like, what's the feedback been like once it did go out live?
yeah, so I found that it really did appeal to people who maybe like us, like we were talking about, have that like nostalgia. People, said like it reminded them of that. But then, it did speak directly to the audience who were asking me, like, how do I figure out my style, or what's your style, Lisa? And then I could point them and be like, hey, well, I have this quiz, and this could help you kind of narrow that down. So I feel like it was received well. I think that, there's always hindsight, right? Hindsight's 2020, but I saw immediate results, so that was also like very validating. I saw subscribers come through. I did. It's one of those things where it's a process. I'm always improving it, and I remember there was a point where like it had been live for 6 months, and I went back and looked at it, like really in depth looked at it, and was like, oh wow, there's some really big changes I should make here, just content wise. Like the voice I used didn't feel like initially authentic. So it's always something like I'm tweaking and updating. I think one of the cool things is that when I did have all those pieces integrated, like the tags and that part of it. So when it switched over to my email platform, I could then have more specific conversations. I could see someone if they asked me a question through email. I could see that they had identified with being like the boho style, and so I could respond like person to person in a really genuine way where I think if it had just been like a PDF opt-in or something, that it's like missing that personal element. And so, I did grow my subscriber list up to about like 5K. So that I felt for me that was a really big accomplishment. But for me, more than numbers, I really feel like there's like a high quality of subscribers. Like people, my engagement rate is really high, my open rate is high. People who respond in email, and I do feel like the quiz kind of was like the welcoming mat for them. Um, and because of that, like all of the sequences and things that I have attached to the results really kind of allowed for just a natural introduction and connection with those people, with the subscribers.
I like that a lot. I haven't heard anyone say that element about when they're responding to an email, they'll look at the tags and see like what somebody answered or their interests. But that that just makes intuitive sense because that's kind of how conversations work. Like it's really nice when you're in a conversation and someone remembers that you are really into mid-century stuff and they thought of you because they saw a lamp and it's like, oh, that feels nice. Um, you kind of do the same thing over email with your customers, which is it's like it shouldn't be so novel, but it kind of is, right? It's
Yeah,
like
it sounds very obvious, but there was a time where the first couple of times I did it, I was like, it felt like a light bulb moment. You know what I mean? Because they had asked me for something specific, like decor advice. And when I looked them up, I was like, oh, I could see what they were interested in. So I could point them to specific blog posts and like answer the question and then say like, oh, these are additional resources you might find helpful. As opposed to maybe just offering like general advice or be like, check out my site. I could really point them in a direction that I hope was meaningful and helpful to them.
yeah, and that really matters. Like it could make somebody's day where it's like, oh wow, they like actually took the time to get to know me a little bit. And obviously you are taking the time, but it doesn't take as long as if you had to like go and try to figure those things out like one at a time. So you kind of have that automated a bit. But yeah, it's just at a broader level, it's shocking to me how many people just don't know anything about who's in their audience or what they're interested in, any of the like soft things, right? Like it's kind of easy to gather the demographic stuff, like oh, where are they from or whatever, but it's much harder to be like, oh, what are they actually interested in, what do they care about, what do they like. So I like that use case. That's really cool. um, Another question that I had earlier was to go from the styles at the end, like the results that you have,
Mhm.
back to the questions where you're trying to figure out what style somebody is. How did you do that process? Like, how did you get again? Like, it's this like paradox of choice or like struggle with like there's only a certain number of questions that you want to ask because you don't want the quiz to be too long, but you also want it to be accurate. How did you like do that and think through those things?
Um, yeah, that's a great question. I'm remembering back because it has been a while, but one thing, well, I do feel like there was a really helpful Interact template, so I can't take all the credit, but I also do remember putting on my teacher hat, and one of the things that like makes for a good assessment is using a variety of entry points and a variety of types of questions. So I use like visuals, so pictures. Um, I did um, like wide view pictures of entire rooms, and then I did ones. I think I have like a specific chair style, and chairs are great because there's very specific chair styles for home decor. Like we probably can all imagine a mid-century chair. And then I did ones that were more like feelings, word based. So like what words resonated with you, So people who resonate with words like cozy and comforting, they're going to have a different response than someone that's like fresh, modern, crisp, contrast. So I try to use visuals, so images, words, and then I think there was like comparison, so trying to get at like this or that. So I tried to find like if I had a sense that if it had been like all pictures, it could skew results. It could because people might just like, oh, I just like this. So I try to find a variety of questions to really get at what is the essence of this particular home decor style.
That's really cool. I interviewed a
Colors, sorry. So there was like the color psychology piece of that. So
oh, so there's a question that's specific to like color, like general, or how's that
yeah,
question
the color
phrased?
palettes and like what color palette. I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but what color palette do you um, feel aligned to, or what color palette do you most appeals to you? Because there are specific colors um, that align best with different styles. So colors, photos, and then word association type questions.
Yeah, and how many questions are there overall? So there's kind of generally three-ish types of questions. Like, because I think maybe it was like around eight was what I remember.
I think I started with 10 to be honest, and I think my last question I had made it more vague, just as like a get to know you kind of question. That could have been useful. Um, I yeah, I would have had to like play that out a little bit more. Um, but when I had gone back and looked at it 6 months later, I felt like 10 felt a little too long. Um, I don't remember if I had used any sort of analytics or metrics for this, but I had a sense that maybe people were entering and not completing the quiz, and so I thought trimming that last question, which was kind of wordy and wasn't really going to affect the results. It was more of just like a get to know you question that I really didn't have anywhere um, to, to go with that data. So it almost felt like a pointless question. So I did delete that one. And then there were two questions that felt too similar. And so I combined them into one. So I think maybe I started at 10 and now I'm at 8, something around there.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of aligns with the data that we've seen, and I like that you have the three different question types to vary it to keep people engaged and interested and keep them on their toes a little bit. Where it's like, because I can imagine what you said, where it's like, if it's just all images, they might just kind of click through ones that look fun and just kind of get into a rhythm of that, and you got to break that up a little bit by then introducing a question that's like, oh, which of these words resonates with how you feel, and then that makes them turns the brain back on instead of like going into that automatic mode. So yeah, that's really smart. um Cool. Well, what about I mean, this is kind of an obvious question, but just like the title of the quiz. Is it just like in your industry, it's just obvious, or was it something that you thought about a whole lot? Because people do ask all the time, like, oh, is my title good?
Um, yeah, so my title has changed a few times. There was a period where I don't remember what the title was, but it made sense to me at the time. But I remember going back and looking at it and being like, this does not feel very clear. It felt a little wordy, and yeah. So I'm not sure what I was thinking at that point, but what I have since done is I used Google Keyword Planner, and so I found um, the high performing keyword phrases, and I I don't actually know what my quiz is called right now. I feel like it's just called a home decor quiz, but it was one of the top performing keywords on Google Planner. So I just use that, and I also use the Pinterest search function. When you search on Pinterest, it will show you a list of suggested commonly searched terms. So knowing that
Mm.
I would, be using Pinterest to promote this as well, those two things together is kind of how I landed at my current title, which feels, it's every like I said, everything's always hindsight. I wish I would have started with that. Like I think I started with something that just felt more like fun and maybe me, but was not going to be as easy to find.
Yeah, I've gone through that same process with many people over the years. It kind of always starts with like this, I don't know, maybe it's an idealized version. I don't know the right word for it, where it's like it's something that's kind of wordy and long and it feels personal, and then usually you end up with something that's just like really simple and basic, and it's like it's kind of the least common denominator phenomenon, I guess, where it's like, yeah, this is the most basic way to say what this is. But then, like, once somebody gets into it, then they can experience more of your personality through the questions, through the way the results are written, which, based on what you've shared, like, there's a lot of personality in those because you really thought through it and it's based on like all your stuff. And so perhaps that's what it is. I don't really have strong data, but it seems like that's kind of the flow that works really well. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think in maybe even just the last year, I've kind of embraced that more, like crafting my descriptions or when I post it on threads or different platforms, using my personal voice, maybe some like humor or really getting to the heart of like, what's the point of the quiz? Like, who cares what your home decor style is? And for me,
hmm.
it's, you know, the idea is to create a home that's like functional foremost and to make life easier. So if you know your style, then you don't need to buy all these extra things. You can kind of just like fine tune your way of living and just make smarter, wiser decisions that make your home feel like a special place. And so, using those descriptions um, and those opportunities on different platforms to share that when I'm sharing the quiz is something I've leaned into instead of trying to like fit all that in the title or the little description or something. So,
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind was jumping to as we were talking through this, is like the promotion aspect or like the sharing it aspect. And what you just said resonates with what I've been seeing a lot, which is like people are sharing like the reasons why you would take the quiz.
mhm.
Not even necessarily like, oh, it's a quiz so you should take it to learn this, but like explaining like, oh, it's valuable to know this because of this, like literally what you just explained. And then the call to action is like, oh, go take the quiz and find out your style. Is that how you've been approaching it, or are there other ways that you found that have worked really well?
Yeah, that is how I've been approaching it. And also, I mean, this is a thing where an aspect I feel, I mean, you try not to have regrets, but I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have been just more explicit and thoughtful in the sharing at the beginning, but really expressing the why and then also what me as Elisa, what I'm going to do to support them afterwards, So I will provide specific paint colors and I will provide you specific decor related posts and resources based on your results. So it will be making your life easier. You will be getting these additional resources at the end that tie into your results. And I think for the first year, I totally just missed that mark and focused on just the like, take this quiz, figure out what your style is. And I didn't share all of the why behind it or why would you take my quiz over somebody else's, what I would be delivering and offering post quiz. Um, so I do feel like I've seen better responses and that just makes sense when that's more clear.
Yeah, that describes it really well. Like this shift that I've been seeing the last few years, where it's like it was a lot of just like sharing a quiz for the sake of sharing a quiz, but now it's kind of flipped around as to why or what the value is of knowing this thing about yourself. And then here's a way to know that thing about yourself. And it's that framing. And I mean, the quiz is just the easiest way to make that happen, outside of like me talking to you, but like I can't do that with every single person. So it's kind of just a tool that does that. But yeah, it's starting with the why. Um, that makes it so much simpler to think about, but also you like have to know the why, right? It's like it's almost like a litmus test to be like, are you for real? Because if you don't know the why of your audience, then it's just gonna like completely fall on deaf ears. Like nobody's gonna pay attention or click on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. There are times where it does make you self-reflect, and there are times where it makes me think, like, am I offering the right thing? Like, am I aligned um, with what I think I'm providing? So I do feel like it's like that constant sense of getting better, rethinking things, um, adapting, changing. So yeah, asking yourself the why, and the quiz is a great tool for that. And it also, it fuels more conversations as to, is it time for a new quiz? Is it time for a different quiz? You know what I mean? Like, or is there another quiz that could complement this one? Or for this audience that has been with me for the 2 years since I created it, are they ready for a new quiz? Maybe it's not a quiz that's just for everybody. Maybe it is, but is there just more opportunities there? That's something I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah, that's another good one to think about where it's like at what point have, most people in your audience maybe taken the quiz, or maybe it's reaching some new people, but it's mostly older people that already know you. And then when's it time to introduce the next concept? And then how do you gather the information for the next concept of like, all right, what's my audience thinking about now?
Mhm.
And how do I turn that into quiz format? And I thought you laid it out really well earlier with like the combination of questions that people ask you and the content that you've created and the styles that people talk about, and where's the opportunity for that in 2025, right? So that's kind of the baseline for the next one. So I think that is a great place to kind of cap things off, where it's like, all right, this is a really awesome experience, and now it's like rinse and repeat, do it again. So thanks for sharing all this with us. It's really helpful context. Where can people go if they want to take your quiz and see what we've been talking about and check out your services?
Yeah, this has been really helpful to as well, just to reflect. And um, all of my information can be found at AllisaJacobs.com. That's ALLISA Jacobs, JACOBS.com. Same name on all the socials. And I have the quiz right at the top of my page, the header, so easy to find.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lisa. Really appreciate it.
Gosh.
Awesome. Just hit the stop button and it'll